Good day, Market Chameleons, and everyone joining us for the first time. Thanks for coming by and checking out the Market Chameleon webinar series. Before we get started, let's take a look at the shared disclaimer. Be aware that neither Market Chameleon, Dimitri, or myself are registered investment advisors or a broker dealer. If you're searching for investment advice, please reach out to a licensed professional. This show and webinar, like all our shows and webinars, are for informational purposes only concerning Market Chameleon tools and products. With that, one last look at the disclaimer, and let's welcome Dimitri Pargamonic to the stage. How you doing, Dima?
Good morning, Will. How are you?
Great. And today we're going to talk about how to use Market Chameleon to screen for unusual option volume and IV rank, correct?
Yeah, I'm going to share my screen and let's go to the stock screener up here. If you hover over the screeners, click on stocks, this will take us to the stock screener. And what we're going to do is a quick filter to narrow down stocks that have an unusual option volume. And we could also use the IV rank, IV percentile rank, for stocks either that have are where the implied volatility is elevated, or we could also look for implied volatility that looks subdued. So down here, if we come, well, up top, if you haven't seen this screener before, we have the filters with different tabs. And then below, we have a data table here with the stock symbol and the related analytics and data that we could use to filter down potential candidates. In this filter here, I'm sorry, I'm looking at the if I have the relative option volume here. Okay, sorry. I'm going to go to this tab under options. Okay. And here we have the different options related analytics to these symbols to the left-hand side. And if we want to look for unusual option volume, you could see here that there's a column here for option volume on a day. So here is NVIDIA. And how do we, define unusual? Well, unusual would be something that's higher than typical, right? Higher than average. So we would have to have a benchmark looking at average daily volume and then creating a ratio of today's volume, let's say 2.9 or 2.5 million here in NVIDIA, and dividing that by the average daily volume, and then we get this ratio. So here you see 0.7, which is below the average daily volume. So if it was right at the average daily volume, we would see that ratio 1, right? If today's volume was 2.5 and average daily volume was 2.5, then this ratio would be 1. If this ratio is above 1, that means today's volume is higher. If it's below 1, that means today's volume was lower than the average. Okay. And next to it, when we look at volume, we may want to ask, well, how's this volume or trading activity impacting option premiums? And when we look at the option premiums and we try to decide, are they priced on the higher end or lower end of the historical range, right? Because when we look at option premiums, we have to compare them on a relative basis. Right? How do we know if they're high or low? Well, just like we do with the volume, we look at the historical ranges, and when we look at the implied volatility, let's say in NVIDIA here, 35.2. Well, what does that mean? Because, Microsoft's 23.9, Apple's 27.7, Amazon 34.9. So the implied volatilities of different stocks are different, and for that particular stock, is it high or low? Right? For NVIDIA, is it high or low? And how do we measure their different metrics? You could look at the averages and look at the distance away from the low, the distance away from the high. But this IV percent rank over here, this looks at the last 252 trading days. Right? So look a year's worth of trading days and says, okay, compare if we sorted all the the last 252 days, if we sorted it from the highest implied volatility to the lowest. So we have 252 observations, and we want to know what percent of those observations are below the current level, right? So this is saying 6% were below, meaning 94% were higher. So this would put it in a lower range, right? So imagine like if there's 600 days of implied volatility, right? Well, 6 of those days would be below. 94 of those days, the implied volatility was higher than 35.2. So that's how we could quickly, create a relative comparison of the volume and the implied volatility. Is it on the high end or low end of its own historical range? So what if we wanted to narrow it down? There's 11,600 stocks in here. So let's come up here and let's first look at an IV percent rank. So let's say we want to look for something that, let's say, is high, right? Let's say it's high. So let's say we want to look at above 90. So above 90th percentile. Well, you could see here that means 97% of, so this is UNH, 97% of the historical observations in the last year were below 51.5, 3% were above. So this is on the higher end, right? These are on the higher end of the historical range. So we filter out of above 90. Now we have 295 different candidates, right? We could also look for a certain IV. Maybe we want to look for a very high IV, so we could look at about 50. So now we got 155 candidates. So now we're looking at implied volatility is about 50. Look over here with IV rank above 90. So now that we got these high implied vol situations, let's look at a lot of relative option activity, right? Let's see things that seem busier than usual. And to do that, we need to go to the relative option volume. So I'm going to go here on the volume, price volume technical. And here we have volume. So you see stock volume, we have option volume, and relative option volume. So let's do the relative option volume. And let's say we were looking for something maybe 3 times its average. Let's go above 3. Well, now we got 30 candidates, right? So we got, I think this is Robinhood, this CNC. This little T means it's part of a takeover target, or something's going on there where some corporate action of a takeover. We got MOH, and got 30 of them over here. And in Robinhood, we see that there was 1.3 million shares, options traded, option contracts, which is 3.6 times normal. And that implied volatility, the 83.5, is in the 92nd percentile rank. 92% of the historical observations were below, 8% above. So what we did, and if let's say we wanted a minimal volume, because like, for example, here, RGC, the option volume is 23 times its average, but it only traded 1,600 contracts. And that's just telling us on the typical day, it doesn't really trade that much, because so 1,600 contracts might not be a whole ton of option contracts traded, but for that stock, that's much higher than usual. Okay, but we could go up here to option volume if we wanted some minimal. Maybe we say above 10,000 contracts, just to get some of those smaller ones out. And now we're down to 5 candidates. So you could see how quickly we went from over 11,600 different stocks, and we used the filters to narrow down to 5 stocks that met this criteria. And we only used, I think like 4 filters here. What did I use? So 2 filters over here and 2 filters over here, right? 4 filters to get down to these 5 different candidates. We could go the other way and see if there's really heavy volume for options, maybe that are getting smashed, or implied volatility is getting crushed to a very low level. So let's go the other way. Let's come back to stocks, and where the IV, let's say, is below a certain level, below 10%. And we're going to just, let's uncheck this minimal IV percentile rank. So now we have 4 stocks over here where the relative option volume is still high, above 10,000 contracts, and on a relative level, it's still high. But we see that the implied vol rank is now below the 10% that we set. So you could see here, we have implied volatility of 88 here, 20, 24, 56. But for those particular stocks, this is on the lower end of its historical range. So, Will, I think I'm going to stop there because we quickly were able to cover those 2 parameters.
That was awesome, D. Great information brought to the Chameleon community, as always. Thanks for doing this. Rob made a good point. It's a short trading day today. The markets are closed at 1, and tomorrow, obviously, is the 4th. So a big day for everyone and a holiday. So hopefully everyone's doing something nice, particularly you, D. Hope you're going to have a great 4th. So everyone,
Thanks, you
be
too.
aware, half day today, or a little more than a half day today, and then no trading tomorrow. So we will see everyone on Monday. Great job, D.
Thanks everyone for joining. Have a great trading day. Stay safe out there. Have a good holiday. See you guys Monday.
And one other thing, D, just a reminder, we have our monthly series with IBKR on Tuesday. So I'll put a link in the chat. What is that topic going to be on?
So that's going to be screening index options for multi-leg trades.
All right. So I'll put that in the chat so everyone can register for that. Great job as always, D. Have a great weekend, my friend.
Thanks, you too.
All right, everyone. So that is the end of today's show. Everyone have a great 4th of July, great weekend. Remember to follow us on all the platforms. If you're on YouTube, please thumbs up. Everyone have a great trading day and a wonderful half day, a great holiday tomorrow, and a great weekend.